Here it is, the video you've been waiting for, if you happen to be one of the specific people who sent me a message asking me to make this specific video. Let's talk about the Edinburgh Fringe Festival 2024. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Jo and I'm obsessed with all things theatre, which is why every summer I head to the world's biggest fringe theatre festival, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I first attended in 2019, the year of 6, back when I was a baby theatre blogger, and I've already lied to you, that was 2018. I went back in 2019, then the world ended for a little bit, but I have been there the past 2 years in an official capacity as an accredited theatre critic, which is one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me because I love the Fringe so much. I get there and I just instantly remember that it's my happy place. It is such an overwhelmingly exciting and inspiring creative space for anyone who loves theatre because there is just so much of it happening, and it's happening, I should say, sort of against the better judgment of many of the artists involved, because it has become prohibitively expensive to go there, to make any money there, to live there for the month, all of which is to say that nobody in theatre is doing the Edinburgh Fringe Festival because it's lucrative. It remains, however, this amazing hub of creativity and innovation and, you know, exciting new work. You can also see amateur and student productions of many of your favourite musicals. Into the Woods is being done twice at the Fringe Festival this year. That happens to be my favourite musical of all time, but when I go to the Edinburgh Fringe, I am mostly focused on the new stuff. And today I'm going to let you know which shows I am most looking forward to this year, and which shows you should consider booking to go see at the Fringe. All of which I tell you with the disclaimer of, I have found it really hard to narrow down this list this year and make my own schedule. I have been almost literally tearing my hair out trying to piece this all together. There are shows I desperately want to see that I just can't find the time to go and see because too many shows are doing the same time slot. I don't know what you all love about like 4 p.m. and 1 p.m. so much that every show is doing one of those 2 times. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but if more of you wanted to throw in an 8 a.m. show or like an 11 p.m, I would be there because I have nothing but availability at those hours. Anyway, my point is there are so many exciting shows to choose from this year, and I am going to help you choose. But before I tell you the shows that I'm excited in, I thought I would let you know how I go about this process and how I actually narrow them down and make my own shortlist. Very teach a man to fish, if you like, but without the presumptuous gender specification, or indeed the fish. Now, if you do enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel, turn on those notifications so you don't miss my upcoming Edinburgh Fringe coverage. But if you want to see my Edinburgh Fringe reviews as soon as they come in, they will appear first on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at MickeyJoTheatre on both of those apps. Go follow me over there. In the meantime, if you are excited to see a show at the Edinburgh Fringe that I don't mention in this video, or indeed if you're an artist taking a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, comment down below and we will all check out your show. For now though, here are the shows I'm most excited about at this year's festival, and also how you can figure out which ones you want to go see. So, how do you figure out which shows you want to go see at Fringe? Well, there are 2 incredibly helpful resources here. The first is the Edinburgh Fringe brochure. You can look on their website and you can find distribution points where you can go and pick one up for free. I grabbed one of the first few days they were available from the Soho Theatre. They literally just had a stand of them. You just go into the foyer, grab one, and then you can go and read it. Much like online shopping versus in-person shopping, I'm a lot better with something I can actually touch and flip through than I am with a website. The website has so many entries it can get a bit overwhelming. However, the website is the second useful resource I'm going to tell you about for many reasons. One of my biggest discoveries this year is that there's a great way to use the website in order to streamline your Fringe experience. So, you can do a search of all of the shows and you can do an advanced search where you can filter by genre. I'm always filtering theatre and musicals. I also glance through the cabaret and variety pages, and it must be said there are a handful of plays and musicals that get listed in what I would objectively say is probably the wrong category. Some of them get called comedy when realistically they're musicals or theatre. You can also filter that search by subgenre. If you're looking specifically for like musicals that you also want to be funny, then you can get incredibly specific, and as you're going through that search you can add them to your favourites. This is very useful because when you get to your favourites on the website, if you've made an account, you can export your favourites as a CSV file and you can open it in a spreadsheet software. I love a spreadsheet, and if this is sounding in any way too technological, don't worry, it's really not that hard. But once you have this spreadsheet, you can filter by venues. So for example, you just see all the shows playing at one venue like the Pleasance Courtyard, and you can then organise them by time, which means you can streamline your Fringe experience. That's something I've done this year for the first time, where I can see immediately, oh, That show is finishing in this venue at 12:45. There's another show that starts in the same venue 15 minutes later. Obviously, I'm going to want to put those back to back. In terms of the other ways that I find a shortlist for the Edinburgh Fringe, I always look at returning artists or companies. Did I really see a show that I loved last year? Is that same company bringing new work to the Fringe? For example, last year I loved Potty the Plant by Little Big Stack. This year they are bringing a new musical called Fringe the Musical, very self-referential, to the Edinburgh Fringe. There's a company that haven't been at the Fringe for a few years called, I believe, A Slightly Isolated Dog, I think is their name. They're an Australian theatre company, and they used to put together the most hilarious shows. I would always go and see whatever it was that they were doing. If you are following a particular comedian, many of them also at the Edinburgh Fringe, which is largely also associated with comedy, almost more so than theatre, honestly. But in terms of the other people that I look for, I'm looking not so much at performers, but certainly at writers, at creatives, and producers. As another example, this year Francesca Moody, the producer behind Kathy and Stella Solve a Murder, Fleabag, and Baby Reindeer, is taking multiple new shows to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Francesca always utilises the Edinburgh Fringe to launch a lot of her most successful shows, and it must be said she has a terrific eye for compelling contemporary theatre. So I am hugely intrigued by all of the shows that she's taking this year. Finally, and though this is not all-encompassing, I do tend to utilize the venues that are programming these shows as a suggestion of quality. And though it's not a consistent rule, there are venues where I tend to see really great stuff, and there are venues where every time I take a risk on them, it pays off less often. That's not to say that that is true for every single show. You will find diamonds when you take a risk on some further afield venues, and there will be some stuff in the more like legitimate theatre spaces that I just don't find particularly interesting. Generally speaking, however, I do tend to spend a lot of my time in the Pleasance Courtyard, at the Traverse Theatre, at Summer Hall. There are also underbelly venues, assembly venues, Gilded Balloon venues. I always end up seeing a handful of their shows. You can find some really intriguing stuff at Greenside, and I've also seen fantastic shows at completely different places. It's very much up to you how much of a risk you want to take. I tend to think if you don't take any risks and you see only shows and performers that you already know about, then you can have a perfectly lovely time, but there are brilliant things that you might not give yourself the opportunity to discover. At the same time, I have taken a punt on a show before and had really terrible theatrical experiences, so that could also happen. Anyway, if you're still feeling a little bit lost and you would just like me to tell you the shows that I'm interested in, here they are. So let's talk about the musicals first of all. There aren't, in general, as many musicals as there are plays at the Edinburgh Fringe, but there are still some very interesting things. And there have been some very successful musicals to come out of the Edinburgh Fringe in recent years, like Kathy and Stella Solve a Murder, which I just saw again last night in the West End, of course Six from a few years ago, Unfortunate, The Untold Story of Ursula the Sea Witch. It was also one of the places where Rob Madge's My Sons Are Queer, But What Can You Do appeared before coming down to the West End in triumph, and it's actually going back there this summer as part of a UK tour. If you haven't seen Rob Madge's show, definitely go and see that. That carries the Mickey Jo seal of approval. As does Potty the Plant, which I told you about before, but specifically if you're looking for something very funny, but in a very insincere, very silly way. It's sort of Star Kid adjacent, but obviously a lot more British. One of the first shows that caught my eye is one called Barbara and Kenneth, which is going to be at Greenside at George Street at 11:30. Obviously that's a play on Barbie and Ken. It says Barbara's taking the stage to tell you what it's like to work over 100 jobs, compete at the Olympics, run for president, and navigate through decades of life in the spotlight. In the year after the Barbie movie, it's obviously very much inspired by that. TikTok star Diana Giulietti is starring in it, which is very intriguing to me. Now, much like Unfortunate, The Untold Story of Ursula the Sea Witch, the Edinburgh Fringe will always attract a lot of, I don't want to say insincere, but sort of funny parody musicals, not doing high art. Come Dine With Me, the musical, is likely to be another example of this. That's going to be at Underbelly Bristow Square. This one says, take a bunch of tuneful strangers, mix in a dollop of behind-the-scenes skullduggery, a sound man playing detective, a sprinkling of star-crossed love, and plenty of juicy arpeggios. Marinade, cook for 60 minutes, and serve hot. And I feel like it's probably likely to poke fun at some of the most iconic moments. If you don't know, Come Dine With Me is a British TV show in which a group of strangers take turns in throwing dinner parties for each other, and then they judge each other and someone wins at the end. Now, I would discourage you from picking shows purely based on their titles, because I've seen some terrible shows with great titles over the years, but this one has caught my eye. Again, this is at Underbelly, but at their Cowgate venue. This is called Diary of a Gay Disaster, and it's going to be at 10 past 10 at night. These three hot queers learn something important. Being a disaster is not a unique talent, it's just embarrassing. Oh well, at least there are sexy togas. Gala me intrigued. There is always plenty of very exciting sort of young LGBTQIA plus work at the Fringe, which is always fantastic. And also the case for this next show, Diva Live from Hell. This also carries the Mickey Jo seal of approval because I've seen this already at the Turbine Theatre. It's a one-person show starring the brilliant Luke Bayer. I saw him do it at the Turbine. He was just fantastic. More recently, it's played at the King's Head Theatre this summer before going to the Edinburgh Fringe. This one is just wonderful. It's kind of a parody of All About Eve, but about this very campy, villainous high school teen who is determined to get the lead role in the school musical. Luke plays various parts in the show. It's very funny, it's very campy, it's kind of old Hollywood meets Heathers in a slightly demented way, and I enjoy it very much. This caught my eye immediately. There's a work in progress concert presentation of a new musical based on the cult film Drop Dead Gorgeous. There's also, speaking of compelling titles, The Emu War, a new musical. This is going to be at the Pleasance Courtyard. I love everything about this. Inspired by the true events of the Great Emu War of 1932, this new comedy musical tells the story of World War I veterans trying to grow wheat in the Australian outback. Man versus emu, who will triumph? Honestly, say less, I'm already there. Now, I told you about Fringe the Musical from Little Big Stack. That's going to be at the Gilded Balloon Patahoose. But there's another Fringe the Musical that is going to be at the Space at Surgeons Hall. One of them is about someone who actually wants to take a show to the Edinburgh Fringe. It's going to be very self-referential and very funny and very silly. The other one is, I believe, about a hairdresser, so it's Fringe the Musical interpreted in a different way. Prepare to be immersed into the chaotic world of hairdressing and fall in love with Darren and the Salon Girls as they attempt to save the salon from financial ruin. I mean, sure. This next one is only doing a handful of dates. It's going to be at the Fringe between August 12th and 17th at 11:40 a.m. It's going to be playing at the Space at venue 45, and it's called The Gardening Club. But it's the description of this that really caught my attention. A new musical that takes place in 1960 Georgia, USA. 6 girls start an illegal drug ring to distribute the birth control pill using their gardening club as a cover-up. I think this is very pertinent and timely and interesting. It's got a catchy pop rock soundtrack. I'm very intrigued by this one. Over at Greenside at Riddle's Court at 8 p.m. at the start of the festival between August 2nd and 10th, there is Here There Be Dragons, which definitely has some kind of Dungeons & Dragons inspiration. It's a musical that premiered off-Broadway in 2022. A sexy, quirky and hilarious look at growing up in a hurry while maintaining the fantasy and wonder that makes us who we are. Very intrigued by that one. Now here's another one, House of Cleopatra. This is going to be at Assembly Checkpoint at 11:15 p.m. This is reminding me a lot of Oscar at the Crown from last year's Edinburgh Fringe, where it's a musical that had a narrative, but it was also very much like an immersive, dancey, clubby experience. It says here, set to an original high-octane pop score by Laura Kleinbaum and Jeff Day, this immersive musical examines history's most mysterious ruler, Cleopatra, and mixes historical drama with an enveloping spectacle that will leave audiences guessing and grooving all night long. Now, like I said, I tend to see stuff that is new, but if you want something a little bit more established, Wolverhampton Grand are also producing a production of I Love You, You're Perfect, Now Change, which is a very cult little comedy musical. From the perils and pitfalls of the first date to marriage, children, and the twilight years of life, which I became aware about because I stumbled onto various performances of the song Single Man Drought, which is just hilarious. I've never actually seen the full show, but like I said, if you're looking for something sort of more established, that's going to be at the Space at Surgeons Hall. There is also I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical. If you just love all things musical theatre and you love stagey references, you're going to find a lot to enjoy in that as well. That's going to be at Gilded Balloon at the museum. Quick sidebar for a moment while we discuss Gwyneth Paltrow, because there are 2 shows at this year's Edinburgh Fringe, both based on the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial. One of them is the Gwyneth Paltrow ski trial musical, I Wish You Well, starring Diana Vickers, produced by Paul Taylor Mills. That's going to be at Underbelly George Square in the big purple inflatable cow. The other one is a show by Linus Karp called Gwyneth Goes Skiing. You may have seen one of Linus's previous shows, Diana the Untold and Untrue Story, which I think is also also being taken to the Fringe alongside this year. There was also the previous very successful How to Live a Jellicle Life lessons from the hit movie musical Cats. Linus is a walking collection of internet memes, very funny, very irreverent, very silly, kind of like the British Cola Scola, if anyone's seen O'Mary on Broadway. And I personally think if you're seeing one of the Gwyneth Paltrow shows, you have to see them both. There is also a Jaffa Cake musical at the Pleasance Courtyard. Now, it's the people doing this that have me intrigued, because this is from MickeyJoTheatre, who previously have produced Scouts the Musical, as well as Timpson the Musical, which I thought was a hilarious concept. There is Kafka's Metamorphosis the Musical with puppets at the Pleasance Dome. I'm not sure I'm going to find time for this one, but I'm just so intrigued by the concept. Someone please go and see it for me and then tell me what it's like. Here's a show that caught my attention, and the venue is Imaginex at Yotel Edinburgh in association with Zoo, which I don't quite understand, but it's called Non-Player Character Live Virtual Reality Musical. And this is a little more participatory than I care to be in my theatre, but part live concert, part escape room, part immersive theatre. Each performance is entirely responsive to the player style, improvisation, and decisions of the audience. 4 audience players join writer-performer Brendan Bradley on stage, wearing virtual reality headsets, while the virtual world and characters are projected on the big screen, inviting both theatre and game lovers to a new kind of play. I mean, I'm very intrigued. There is also Our Little Secret, the 23andMe musical at Gilded Balloon Patahoose, and it was the winner of the Best of the Fringe Toronto 2023. That's kind of all I need. That is an approval enough to get me to go and see a show. At Gilded Balloon Patahoose, Blair Russell, who is also the producer of Diva Live from Hell, is bringing another show called Pop Off Michelangelo, world premiere musical comedy about besties turned bitter rivals Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Can Michelangelo gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss his way to the Vatican? Will Leonardo shut up about his helicopter? Again, say less, I'm already excited. Now, I mentioned earlier about parody musicals. You have Silence the Musical, the unauthorized parody of The Silence of the Lambs. That's going to be at Underbelly Bristow Square at 11:15 at night, which gives you a sense of the tone of the thing. This musical has been seen before off-Broadway. If you're any kind of a fan of this film and, you know, interested in seeing it turned into something raunchy and completely stupid, go and see this show. Between August 13th and 25th at Just the Tonic at the Mash House, Summoning Sondheim sounds brilliant. This is a cabaret comedy seance, not words you normally hear together, that uses the power of musical theatre to summon us theatre kids' Lord and Saviour, Stephen Sondheim. I do plan to go and see it, and I'll let you know what he says. There is also Tones, a hip-hop opera. Now, this is being presented at Roundabout at Summer Hall, which is this yellow tent at Summer Hall, and every year I try and find the great shows there. It's where Kathy and Stella Solve a Murder first was. It's where Baby Reindeer was when I saw it at Fringe. There are so many brilliant pieces of theatre to see in that space. And I occasionally in recent years seem to see good stuff, but I miss some of the great stuff. So this year I am simply seeing every single show in that space, and I'm going to spend the whole day there, one show after the other. I think there are 9 in total, and I'm just going to see every single thing that has been programmed for that space, because I have a lot of faith in the people who program for that venue. For something a little bit more commercial, there is Who Do You Love, which is the Casey and the Sunshine Band musical. That's going to be at Assembly George Square Studios at 4:50 in the afternoon. ATG Productions are one of the producers of that, which makes me very intrigued. There's also Willy's Candy Spectacular, a musical parody. This is a satire inspired by the Glaswegian Willy Wonka experience that made headlines for being a controversial AI-written ripoff, but it has some incredibly exciting writers behind it, including the writers of High School Musical, the series, of First Date, and also of the Ratatouille TikTok musical. I believe they've also recruited Andy Fickman of Heather's fame to direct, and they've even enlisted a couple of the stars of the original Gene Wilder film to play the narrators, and I think the sad Oompa Loompa from the memes is going to be part of the cast as well. That's going to be at the Pleasance Dome, and I feel like that's going to be unmissable. Finally, at Assembly Checkpoint, another of my favourite spaces, at 3:55 in the afternoon, you can see You and It, which is a Korean musical being presented in English, about which I am very intrigued. Now let's talk about the plays. So my friend Grace Aki is actually taking her solo show to the Edinburgh Fringe for the first time. Grace is perhaps one of the smartest and funniest humans I know in real life. I haven't had a chance to see her show before. I've heard only great things about it. It's going to be at the Royal Scots Club at 4:15 in the afternoon, and it's called To Free a Mockingbird. This is an exceptionally talented multi-hyphenate creative. Go and see her show. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to go and see it myself. I mentioned I was seeing the other shows in Roundabout. Those are Nation, Every Brilliant Thing, which I think might actually also be a musical, Bell Ringers, My Mother's Funeral, The Show, How I Learned to Swim, Play Fight, VL, and Main Character Energy. As well as Roundabout, the other venue where I try and see as much of their work as possible is the Traverse Theatre. I've seen some incredible things at the Traverse over the years. This year, one of the shows I'm most excited about there is called The Sound Inside. This was a multi-Tony Award nominated play by Adam Rapp. At the Assembly Roxy, I am very intrigued about Three Chickens Confront Existence. Three factory farm chickens attempt to find a greater sense of purpose by engaging each other in a series of philosophical debates, games, feuds, and emotional experiments. At Summer Hall, where you will find incredibly creative and innovative theatrical work, there is 300 Paintings. Winner of 8 Australian Fringe Festival Awards, an epic story exploring art, mental health, and creativity. I'm interested. Another solo show also at the Traverse Theatre is Batshit. This is a wildly theatrical and deeply intimate story of female madness. Created by Psycho Siren Leah Shelton and directed by Olivier Award-winning Ursula Martinez, this is a requiem for Leah's grandmother Gwen, who was incarcerated for seeking independence in 1960s Australia. Very interested in that one. In the second half of the month, there is Blubber at Summer Hall. I'm going to see this because it's been created by Katie Greenall, who is a theatre maker whose work I very much enjoyed before, talking a lot about body image and identity. Burning Down the Horse is an immersive comedy epic that drops you into the heart of the most iconic wooden animal in history, the Trojan horse. That's an incredibly funny title that I'm hoping carries through into the play. I remember seeing that flyering last year and not having time to go see it. This year I plan to. Here's one that looks very interesting. This is at the Assembly Rooms, and it's LGBTQ+ new writing. This is Conversations We Never Had as People Will Never Be. After buying and consuming a pill online, Gina and Frankie are given 30 minutes to decide whether or not to erase their relationship from their memories forever. That sounds cathartic. Ooh, there is Cyrano at the Traverse. This is another of the things I'm most looking forward to at the Traverse Theatre. This is Virginia Gay's joyous, gender-flipped retelling of Cyrano, packed with music, wit, and aching romance. A love letter to hope, to language, and desire, to the irrepressible magic of theatre, which sounds very different to Jamie Lloyd's take on Cyrano a few years ago. That's why I'm so intrigued by this one. David William Bryan is bringing back his 2 solo shows, The Fragility of Man and In Loyal Company. I've seen Fragility of Man before. He's an exceptionally good solo show storyteller, just incredibly powerful. Go and see his shows. At the Pleasance Courtyard, we have Did You Mean to Fall Like That, which is a brand new comedy exploring contemporary masculinity and male bisexuality by award-winning writer Stephanie Martin, and a lot of that feels like untrodden ground within the world of queer theatre, so that's interesting to me. Here's another one, A Giant on the Bridge. This is going to be at 10:40 in the morning at Assembly Roxy. Unflinching, spellbinding gig theatre devised by award-winning theatre maker Liam Hurley and songwriter Joe Mango. Every year in Scotland, thousands of people return home from prison to an uncertain future. A Giant on the Bridge reveals the hidden heartbeat within one such story. That sounds beautiful. Speaking of gig theatre, the next show is actually 2 shows being staged as a pair. This is Half Man, Half Bull, Part 1 and Part 2 at Summer Hall, telling the stories of Theseus and Daedalus. I am hugely interested in this one. I'm very excited to go and see both parts. Oh, for the theatre lovers among you, which I assume is all of you, there is also Hamstrung. This is an LGBTQ+ solo show at the Pleasance Courtyard, and it's all about Hamlet's legendary jester Yorick. Join Yorick as he reconnects with his lost love of performance, embarking on a high-spirited journey to discover what really happened in Elsinore. And it's giving Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead if it was to happen at the Edinburgh Fringe. Here's another show at the Traverse Theatre that is already starting to sell out. Perhaps they know something that I don't. This is called A History of Paper by Oliver Emanuel and Gareth Williams. A musical love story about a man and a woman and the little bits of paper that make up a life. Now here's some more very intriguing queer theatre. This is Hyper at Summer Hall. Told through live vocal modulation and manipulation, this is a rip-roaring and unabashedly queer theatrical deep dive into trans identity and music. Also at Summer Hall, this is one of the Francesca Moody produced shows I've been telling you about, also being produced with Audible, interestingly enough. This is I'm Almost There. All he wants to do is let the perfect man in, but can he overcome his unhinged neighbour, a seductive cult, a self-obsessed vampire, and a cat intent on dragging him to hell? Whatever I thought this was when I started reading the description, I now have no idea, but I am fascinated. New York favourite Todd Almond's rueful, hilarious and poignant modern love story and song about a man crossing a sea of doubts to find happiness and good coffee. At the Pleasance Dome, there is also I Really Do Think This Will Change Your Life. This is being co-produced by the Mercury Theatre, which is how I found out about it. And it's all about multi-level marketing schemes, I believe. A finalist for the Stage Innovation Award, this is a hair-pulling, fake nail-scratching catfight against get-rich-quick schemes and what it means to be a girl boss. TM. Also at Summer Hall and beginning to sell out, there is June Carter Cash, The Woman, Her Music and Me. This is being co-produced by the National Theatre of Scotland and Gridiron Theatre Company. The story of one of country music's most iconic voices. In a raw yet uplifting show, Charlene Boyd gets to grips with a life less ordinary. Here's what has me intrigued. More than a simple biography, this play with songs sees Charlene explore her relationship with her musical heroine and their shared experience as performers and working mothers. And it's a personal journey stretching across the Atlantic from the Appalachian Mountains to the Glasgow high-rise flats. Very intrigued about the duality of that and how it brings both of those identities together. If I can get tickets, that is, because it's selling out. Here's another play at Traverse that looks to be incredibly timely. This is called A Knock on the Roof. It's described as a heartbreaking, gripping and surprisingly comedic, timely solo show directed by Oliver Butler, premiering ahead of a highly anticipated off-Broadway run in New York City. So it's going to the Edinburgh Fringe first, and it appears to be set in Gaza. Here's an absurdist LGBTQ+ show that's going to be at the Space at Niddry Street called A Letter to Lyndon B. Johnson or God, whoever reads this first. From consecutive 2022 and 2023 Fringe First Award winners comes an absurdist two-hander about the idealised American childhood and the boys it left behind. There's also The Long Run at Pleasance Courtyard, which is being co-produced by the New Diorama Theatre, a theatre that has given us many great things over the years. Last year at the Edinburgh Fringe, I saw After the Act, a Section 28 musical. That was from the New Diorama. Operation Mincemeat first premiered at the New Diorama. It's now an Olivier Award-winning West End musical. It's also being directed by the New Diorama's new artistic director, Beck Martin. And it's a joyful, captivating comedy about love, cancer, and running for a really long time. Finally, Surrender at Summer Hall is a play I am hugely interested in because it has been written by Sophie Swithenbank, the writer of the multi-award winning Bacon, which was just about the best thing that I saw at the Edinburgh Fringe last year. Finally, I will leave you with a couple of cabaret suggestions. The wonderful and luminous Janie D, West End star, is going to be doing a cabaret all about climate change awareness. Reuben Kay returns to the Edinburgh Fringe to not only bring his own cabaret show, but also to host the K-Hole, which I don't think I'm going to have time to go and see this year, which is devastating. I'm going to try and see his show because the Edinburgh Fringe without Reuben Kay is not the Edinburgh Fringe. TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney is bringing a one-person show to the Edinburgh Fringe. Very excited about that. And there are a handful of other things that I have my eye on as well, but I feel like that's enough to get you started. Like I said, have a look through that brochure for yourselves, look at the genres and the vibes that you're interested in. Look on the website as well. Use that advanced search to filter everything through, and best of luck with planning your Edinburgh Fringe shows. I have had the most stressful time imaginable, and just looking through those lists again, there are so many things I desperately want to find time to see, so I may yet throw everything up in the air and completely redesign mine, but rest assured by the time we get to August I will be seeing plenty of shows at the Edinburgh Fringe. Like I said, make sure you're subscribed with the notifications turned on here so you don't miss my Fringe coverage, but also I will be posting the individual reviews on my Instagram and TikTok feeds. Make sure you're following me at MickeyJoTheatre on those as well. In the meantime, I hope that this has been informative and helpful. Again, let us know in the comment section down below which shows you are looking forward to seeing at the Edinburgh Fringe. If you are taking a show to the Edinburgh Fringe, let us know. I hope that everyone is staying safe, looking forward to this year's Fringe, and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm MickeyJoTheatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!